Our special guest speaker today is a nationally known political commentator, Scott Jennings, a renowned conservative analyst on CNN. Dubbed the black sheep of CNN by the Daily Mail, and Lonely Scott by Bill Maher for his engaging nightly debates, Jennings has become a fixture of CNN's election and major event coverage. Scott's career spans decades at the intersection of politics and media. A trusted advisor on 4 presidential campaigns, he served as special assistant to President George W. Bush and played pivotal roles in high-profile Senate and congressional races. Beyond the campaign trail, Scott has taught at Harvard's Kennedy School, shaping the next generation of public servants. He is also a founding partner of Run Switch Public Relations, Kentucky's largest PR and public affairs firm. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Scott Jennings.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you all for having me here in Minneapolis tonight. On most nights, I'm accustomed to being yelled at by 5 or 6 people at the same time, so this is something of a reprieve. If you've seen any of these battles that I'm involved in on CNN, you know how they go. In fact, we're thinking of changing the name of the network to Scott, because that's the most commonly heard phrase every night. It's a lot of fun, actually. Sometimes it's a lot of frustration. I've developed my own proprietary program of deep breathing exercises, which you can order from my website for $19.99. Will help you through the most frustrating moments in your life. The truth of the matter is, though, I wouldn't trade this job or this moment for anything, because I believe that conservatives must go boldly into every arena, including the media, and stand up for our values. We cannot recede. We cannot recede. We cannot concede, not in politics, not in education, not in culture, and certainly not in the media. We have to show up. We have to speak clearly, and we have to defend what we know to be true, even when the room isn't full of applause. So that's why I stay. That's why I stay in this job. That's why I permit myself to be yelled at by Anna Navarro once or twice a week. That's why I'm proud to be here with all of you, because everybody in this room believes in that same kind of courage. So thank you for what you do. It's an honor to be with you at this dinner. The Center of the American Experiment is an institution that punches far above its weight in the battle for our future. Here in Minnesota and across the country, this organization is a powerhouse for common sense policy, serious research, and unapologetic American values. Whether it's defending economic freedom, advocating for safe streets, quality education, standing up for law enforcement, traditional institutions, fighting for political power in the state legislature, this center is leading the charge on issues that matter to everyday Americans. The value of a group like this is rooted in truth and outcomes. So it's refreshing to see a think tank that's committed to facts, results, and sanity. This center is one of the few places in America where public policy hasn't been completely replaced by public performance art. So congratulations on your recent victories in the legislature. And by the way, doing all of this from Minneapolis, it's like running a steakhouse at a vegan convention. I mean, you guys... Maybe to the people around here, it's starting to taste pretty good. We'll find out. But the work that you do takes guts. You're not just pushing back against the left's agenda. You're doing it here in the heart of a progressive laboratory And that deserves real credit. The courage and the stamina and the Midwestern politeness for which you battle for Western civilization is impressive. And as someone who spends a lot of time on television trying to make the case for sanity in the public square, let me say this clearly. Groups like yours are the backbone of the conservative movement. You shape the debate, you hold the line, and tonight it is my privilege to be here just to say thank you for the work you do, for the truth that you tell, and for the inspiration to the rest of us who are all doing our part to fight for and defend Western civilization. Thank you all very much. It's energizing to be joined by conservatives and patriots who believe that America survives and thrives because our nation is built upon certain unshakable truths. Truths like the right to speak freely, the beauty and sanctity of life, the blessings of family, and the societal strength that flows from it, and the duty to protect civilization from those who would tear it down. My wife and I have a big family back in Kentucky. 4 boys, 15, 11, 9, and 7. My oldest turns 16 next week. God help any of you if you're driving through Kentucky in the next 6 months. It's a wild household with the kids, so we decided to also add 35 chickens, 3 dogs, and a bearded dragon. A lot going on in the Jennings household. The chicken farming's actually been a real joy. We started with 6, now we have 35. Chicken math, if any of you are into this hobby. We accidentally acquired a rooster once. We didn't intend to. Found out that they don't just crow in the morning, they crow all day. And they constantly sexually harass their coworkers. So we named him Governor Cuomo, and he didn't last long. We traded him to another farm, so he's gone now. But we're raising a family back in Kentucky in a world where the nuclear family is under assault, where so many of our values, the underpinnings of our culture and civilization, are being attacked on so many fronts. So when I look at my boys and I think about their futures, I want them to grow up not just in a rich country. I want them to grow up in a good country that believes in the truth, that protects free speech, that celebrates family, and that defends life, born and unborn. A country that does not apologize for its faith, its history, or its heroes. So that's why I'm in the fight. That's why you're in the fight, I suspect. And it's why events like tonight's really matter. Because if we don't speak up, who will? If we don't defend the truth, who will? If we don't show up, the spaces that we abandon will be filled by people who despise everything that we cherish. Tonight, I wanted to spend some time offering some observations on the state of our national political affairs, our political media, what it's like to be the black sheep of CNN. Gotta love the British tabloid media. They have the best headlines. It's been an interesting year for me, to say the least, and I have to give credit to my employer, CNN, which, for those of you who've never seen it, is a national news network that's been around since 1980. Previously, we aired wrestling matches. Well, actually, we still do that, so it's fine. But no, my employer saw the value last year in having one lonely person speak for half the country, or on most issues, 80% of the country. That's why Bill Maher did call me Lonely Scott last year during the conventions. I actually flew here this morning from Los Angeles because last night I was in LA to do Bill Maher's show. I was in the belly of the beast. I think if you watch the episode, you'll find that I was a dose of Pepto-Bismol for the real-time audience. But even though I'm often one man standing athwart a braying mob, I don't really feel lonely anymore, because over the last several months, an amazing online community has grown up around some of these debate moments that are going viral on CNN. People who haven't watched the network in years, or maybe never at all, are tuning in, or seeing the clips in their social media feeds. I think at a minimum, what we're doing at 10 o'clock each night is making cable news interesting and watchable. We're making cable great again. But I think television is relatively boring if you just put 5 or 6 people out there who agree on everything and are only there to congratulate each other on their increasing levels of smugness. We don't learn anything from that. That sort of television, I think, just plunges us further into our ideological bubbles that are destroying our collective ability to disagree with each other. These conversations among Democrats and Republicans, or a Republican in this case, among the rural and the urban, among men and women, young and old, these are good things. These are necessary things. Doesn't mean we'll always agree, but the simple acts of conversation and debate, the exchange of discourse, is a tie that has bound this nation together for 250 years. We argue, sometimes heated. We campaign, usually extremely heated. And then we vote. And then we do it all again in 2 years, and then we do it all again in 2 years hence. And that's the way we do it in America, folks, and it's worked out pretty well so far. But I heard a leading Democratic congresswoman say on the television the other day, well, I don't even know if we'll have elections in 4 years. She was explaining why it was imperative that Donald Trump be resisted at all costs. Okay, it was Jasmine Crockett. She's the unquestioned leader of the Democratic Party. Thank God for Jasmine, by the way. I see the left has learned all the correct lessons from the last election. But what a corrosive statement. The fabric of our democracy is tested from time to time. But to introduce these sorts of ideas that the next election might be canceled undermines faith in our system. We heard it all throughout 2024. This is the last election we'll ever have. The sad part is that when you speak these things out loud and into existence, there are certain people out there who take them seriously. And that's not the only bad idea floating around. If I may take this opportunity to chastise the former director of the FBI for his post this week. The incitement of violence against this president or anyone in politics must be called out, and the people who do it must be held accountable, no matter what position you held in the government. I can't tell if these people believe this crazy talk or if they're just thirsty for clicks. But it's bubble speak. It's the catering to the fever swamps of the left-wing fringe. And it worries me. But that's what the left thrives on, apocalyptic, doomsday tales told to them by low IQ news anchors on MSNBC. They love the bubble. They love the bubble. They cannot stand to ever be confronted with an opinion that challenges their priors. Me? I prefer being in the arena to being in a bubble, because we learn more in the arena. We learn more about ourselves, and we learn more about our country. The events of the last few days have reinforced the need for conservative voices and counter-arguments on television. Look at what we have learned about the Biden presidency. Scratch that. Look at what the media and the Democrats have learned about the Biden presidency. Because I suspect everybody in here with eyes and ears already knew it. The cover-up, the president's impairment, the smearing of Robert Hur, the special counsel who warned us that the president was in such mental decline, he could never be convicted in front of a jury because they would have seen him as a sympathetic, confused old man. The things that are coming out and being said are breathtaking. It is the biggest scandal in modern American political history, bar none. If I had a nickel for every time, if I had a nickel for every time I had heard an anchor or a fellow commentator use the phrase, the big lie, after the 2020 election, I'd be a rich man. But I wonder what they have to say for themselves now about the lies that we were told about Joe Biden Oh, behind closed doors, he's fine. He's riding unicycles and juggling knives and doing trigonometry blindfolded. What would they say about the enormous conspiracy that was required to cover up this impairment? What would they say about the coordinated smear campaign against anyone who dared question it? And what would they say about the clear fact that unelected people were making decisions in a constitutional republic in the name of a president who had no idea what was going on? Shame. Shame on every one of these people who inflicted the real big lie on America and the constitutional crisis upon the people of the United States. The absolute depravity and irresponsibility of all of this is breathtaking. In your lives, I'm sure many of you manage important things. Are you allowed to be so cavalier with your personal and professional responsibilities? Of course not. If you were that irresponsible, you'd probably be in jail. But as conservatives, we're held to a higher standard, aren't we? I wonder sometimes why the people on the left are so cavalier when it comes to managing our public discourse, or in this case, the very fabric of our constitutional republic. Is it not just as important to tell the truth, to debate in good faith, to simply admit that the President of the United States is too impaired to continue? Political power flows from the people of the United States. But in this case, the case of the Biden cabal, power was dammed up and controlled by a small group of Democratic operatives, media enablers, and Joe Biden's closest relatives. Will there ever be accountability? You know, in the media, we tend to overlook this kind of gross irresponsibility, and we recirculate the same people who do it over and over again. And then we wonder why trust in media is falling and why viewership is falling even faster. I've been at this job at CNN now for a few years. I've seen a lot of people come and go. It is my fervent wish for us to do better as a media industry and as a political industry in general. Just do better. Make a better product. Don't crush dissenting viewpoints. Reward honesty and integrity, and ensure that the entire country is represented at the table instead of just a narrow few. Before I joined CNN in 2017, I had a fairly long career in politics. As was mentioned, I started with George W. Bush. That was my first paid campaign job. Before that, I licked envelopes for Mitch McConnell in 1996. I've been a personal friend and advisor to him for a long time. I served in the Bush 43 White House. I worked for Mitt Romney in 2012. I've consulted dozens of candidates across the country. Today, my work on CNN revolves around explaining Donald Trump to our audience and to my bewildered castmates. I'm just trying to bring some common sense and balance to the conversation that are often framed off the rails to begin with and would never find their way back if it weren't for my intervention. But it's been an unusual journey, and I've lived through 25 years of political upheaval and change, especially inside my own party. And I get asked often, how do you go from Bush to McConnell to Romney to being Donald Trump's favorite pundit? What is the ideology of the Republican Party? It's a good question because some things about the party are changing, but there is a through line that endures. It is more clear to me now than it has ever been. The Republican Party is simply the party of common sense. And every one of the leaders that I mentioned, at their moment in history, was the clearest defender of Western civilization at the time. That was true then, and it is 100% true of Donald Trump today. And if you want one more reason for good measure, it's that the Republican Party believes that the fundamental and irreplaceable right to free speech must be defended at all costs. Now, in my personal opinion, I think only one party is fully committed to that idea today. Not to say there aren't individual Democrats that I think are pro-America, pro-free speech, pro-Western civilization. I count among my better friends at CNN, David Axelrod and Van Jones. Good men, Democrats, but good men. We open our hearts and our ears to each other before we open our mouths, which is a good rule of punditry, by the way. Both Axe and Van understand the value of platforming voices from across the political spectrum and from different walks of life. They believe in debate. But I think that attitude is falling out of vogue. Let us not forget that this is a nation founded on political debate and political speech. Recall from your history classes the pamphlet wars and our debates over the Constitution, the Lincoln-Douglas debates, any of the passionate arguments that are made in your own state capitol. This is the essence of our political culture, the ability to debate and reason with one another and to achieve an outcome born of that exercise. But today, the culture of cancellation and the unwillingness of so many people to step outside of their ideological bubble to try to understand their fellow citizen endangers, I'm afraid, the American experiment. Today, I think the right and the left are headed in two very different directions. I'm afraid the left, here and abroad, has become a movement of censorship and illiberalism. They'll throw you in jail over in Europe if you post the wrong meme on Facebook. It's dangerous stuff. And in several European countries, opposition political leaders have been jailed by ruling governments. And lest you think that it cannot happen here, let me remind you that the oldest newspaper in America had its social media accounts shut down in October of 2020 for accurately reporting on the son of the likely next president of the United States. And that the Democratic Party spent a considerable amount of time and your money on trying to jail the current president of the United States. Even as they were lying to you about the mental capacities of the sitting president of the United States at the time. I was on CNN this week with a Democratic political operative named Liz Smith. She worked for Pete Buttigieg. She's a well-known Democratic communicator, chattering head type. She admitted to me on television, we might have gone too far with the resistance. I said, what do you mean? Well, you know, we did charge him with 34 felonies. I said, are you admitting that the case against Donald Trump was nothing more than an attempt to upend the presidential election? She said, well, of course it was. It was a Democratic prosecutor. Even as we gather here tonight, there are people across this country who are still vandalizing Teslas and firebombing dealerships and charging stations. I'm sure you've seen the videos. It's domestic terrorism. I even read that here somebody did $20,000 worth of damage and somehow got off without any charges. Seems like the no one is above the law party found a few exceptions. Why is all this happening? Because a guy who makes a car and used to be a Democrat switched sides and supported Donald Trump and joined his administration. That's all. That's Elon's great sin. He made a political choice. He engaged in political speech. And now he and his workers and his customers are paying for it. Tim Walz, your governor, that's right, who is a total buffoon. I am so sorry for you people. My God. Tim Walz now pulls out his phone during his speeches and he says, I watched the Tesla stock ticker. Now, this is a man who said in the presidential campaign he'd never owned a stock or a mutual fund in his life. But now he has the Tesla stock ticker. He says it gives him a boost when it goes down. Now, this company has 80,000 American workers, and you guys own like 1.6 million shares of it. It's utter derangement. However, in better news, since Waltz made the comment, Tesla stock is up about 50% in the last month. Terrible month for Tim Walz. I think maybe Monday morning we should call him and ask him for 5 other companies that he hates. We'll all pool our money. By Friday, we'll all be retired. I met the spouse of one of your legislative leaders earlier. Nice lady. She said, "Oh, it's a circus up at the Capitol." I said, "That makes sense since your governor's a clown." There is not a person in American politics more in over their head than Tim Walz. He once explained during the campaign why he lied so much. He said, "Well, I'm just a knucklehead." I said, "Why does this man continue insulting knuckles this way? I don't understand. What did they ever do to you?" Here's a quote from Tim Walz about Elon Musk. "I'm not a vindictive person, but I take great pleasure in the fact that this guy's life is going to get very, very difficult. It is a dangerous combination, folks. Unbridled buffoonery combined with an extremely mean spirit." Now, the message that I take away from this kind of attitude is clear and unmistakable. Silence yourselves, or we'll do it for you. Jimmy Kimmel, the late-night comedian, led his audience the other night in hoops and cheers for Tesla to fail as a company. He delivered a very unsubtle message that he was A-OK with the vandalism that was going on against the cars. You should watch the video. He's very clear. But of greater concern, his audience could not get enough of it. Silence yourselves, or we'll do it for you. The other day, my new friend Bill Maher had the audacity to have dinner with the President of the United States. And then he talked about it on his show. This led to enormous backlash from the left. Even his fellow comedian and friend of 35 years, Larry David, took to the pages of the New York Times with an op-ed comparing Trump to Hitler and ripping the bark off of Bill Maher, who has been one of the most consistent Trump critics for 3 decades. What a world when someone like Bill Maher can't even accept a dinner invitation from the president without undergoing immediate character assassination from his own side. Silence yourselves, or we will do it for you. That's always the message. The stench of censorship and intimidation is always right on the edge of our politics, and it must be rejected wherever we find it. Let me talk about President Trump for a few minutes. Actually, let me just tell you a quick story. I actually met him for the first time in February. It's funny, he's dominated almost my entire professional existence for the last decade and all my conversations, but I hadn't met him until February. So I went over to the Oval Office to pitch him on a book idea, which I'm happy to report is now available for pre-order. The Revolution of Common Sense is the title. If you have $30, there it is. You can pre-order it right now. Why aren't you pulling out your phones? I don't understand. If Tim Walz can do it, you can do it. Pull out your phones. Put as many zeros as you'd like in the quantity box. So I go into the Oval Office to see the president. I hadn't been in there since 2008 when George W. Bush was in office, so open the door. Almost the entire cabinet is in there. I walk in and he looks up from the Resolute desk and he says, "You look terrific." I mean, you look good on TV, but in person, you look terrific. Have a seat. So I plop down on the couch next to Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury. Does everybody here know Scott? He's like our best guy. Scott, tell Marco what you would do about the Panama Canal. If you have $30, you can read the rest. To be honest, Scott was a little bit average, but then I came along and now he's terrific. The whole time I was sitting there, I was thinking, I don't know who in the hell was running the country the last 4 years, but I sure as hell know who's running it right now. But I have to admit, I did not get it at first. My dad actually was the first person to tell me that Donald Trump would be the next president, way back in early 2015. My dad, the garbage man, the sometimes factory worker, the union Democrat, the old blue dog. And of course, I laughed at him, just like everyone else who'd been trained to believe that the political status quo was ultimately unshakable. But he was right and I was wrong. And I think about that conversation with my dad a lot because I was so certain, arrogant, really. But he was right and I was wrong. And thank God that he was right and I was wrong. From that point forward, it's incredible what's happened in our politics, in our culture, and in our country. Everything I thought I knew about politics changed. One of the reasons I think Trump has been successful is that he has given millions of people who think they have no voice the feeling that someone finally speaks for them in the way that they would speak if they were handed the microphone. No longer do people expect their politicians to speak perfectly. They want their politicians to speak authentically. Trump's new coalition contains millions of people who aren't connected to either party. People who have no interest in being labeled Democrat or Republican, but a lot of interest in feeling like they're just supporting plain old common sense. I traveled with the president to Michigan aboard Air Force One on April 29th, his 100th day in office, trying to finish this book. So he takes me to Michigan to observe the 100th day. At the rally that night in Macomb County, Michigan, he summed it up. The last 14 weeks is really just a restoration of common sense when you think about it. Whether you're right or left or whatever the hell you are, that's all it is, just common sense. The crowd roared. And then he did the most unexpected thing. He called me up on the stage. We've got this guy. Where's Scott? Oh, this will be the end of Scott on CNN. Don't worry, Scott. If they fire you, we'll take care of you. I'm like 150 feet away from the stage, so I start jogging up there. And the whole time I'm thinking, I got to keep this short and keep it funny. So I said, people of Michigan, when we were flying in here, I was admiring all your farms. Maybe I'll get a farm in Michigan, because when you own as many libs as I do, you got to have a place to put them all. Trump, who is also, in addition to being president, the greatest stand-up comedian working today, approved of the joke and laughed and shook my hand and ushered me off the stage. To Trump's coalition, he represents a political and cultural axis that blends three things: the restoration of common sense in our culture, the defense of Western civilization in our world, and the promotion of free speech for everyone. That's why the coalition is so ideologically elastic. We've got people all across the spectrum. We've got RFK Jr., Elon, Mitch McConnell, and Rand Paul from my home state. Hulk Hogan? They actually let me meet the Hulkster last summer at the RNC. I've been trying to meet him for 40 years. I went down to the dressing room and I heard him behind closed doors rehearsing. But then he came out and his hand was shaking. And I said, are you nervous? And he said, I never do politics, brother. I said, well, you body slammed Andre the Giant in front of 90,000 people. I think it'll be okay. This coalition is remarkable because it also includes record numbers of minority voters and young people, especially aged 18 to 21. They're the most conservative people in the country. We warned them, you better open the schools. They wouldn't listen. Now the kids are pissed, they're conservative, and they're ready to fight. But this realignment is happening before our eyes. I called it on election night on CNN when they finally let me out of my cage at 3:38 a.m. and admitted Trump had won. The revenge of the average American who plays by the rules, pays their taxes, and simply wants to get up, go to work, provide for their families without being condescended to, insulted, or otherwise despised by the elites in Washington, D.C. This realignment is coinciding with a crisis of institutions in this country. Most people don't trust most institutions right now, especially the media. Now, we can lament this crisis, many do, but the question is, does the media deserve it? For the last 25 years, we've seen the dramatic fall of the traditional mainstream media as a trusted source of information. It gives me no pleasure to report this. I work in it, after all. And I strongly believe in a free, trusted press that presents information fairly and clearly to the American people. But it's true, the mainstream media is struggling. Look at the latest Gala poll. They asked these questions about who do you trust? In 2004, half the country, a little over half actually, had a fair amount or a great deal of trust in the media. Today, that number is just 31%. And 36% say they have literally no trust in it at all. None. More people have no trust than a great deal combined with a fair amount. So what's happened as a result? People are looking elsewhere for information. They are more willing, even eager than ever, to question what they are told by official sources. Elon Musk has adopted a new tagline for his X platform. We are the media now. He's doing with information what Trump did to politics in 2016. They both found a market demand for something different, and they both met the moment. With Trump, it was a market demand for something more authentic in our politics, something to break us free from the elite speak and the pablum that had people fuming. Trump's campaign in 2016 was the beginning of a war on political pablum. And his comeback in 2024 was the final battle against the political information distribution complex that has dictated the narratives of our political coverage for too long. Think about what you were told in October. Well, if you've ever stepped foot in Madison Square Garden and you're voting for Donald Trump, you're a Nazi. Sorry. How'd that sit out here in Minnesota? Well, you know, a comedian spoke at a rally 3 hours before Donald Trump, and he told a joke about Puerto Rico, and you know, Puerto Ricans are the most important voting bloc in Pennsylvania, so I guess Kamala Harris is going to win? Oh, the Oracle of Des Moines has a poll. Who remembers the famous poll? Looks like Harris has got it. I could go on, but the political information distribution complex was wrong, 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 wrong. Why has the media fallen out of favor? Because in many cases, the narrative is more important than the truth. Was a comedian's poor joke really going to be more important to voters than, say, runaway inflation or an open border? No, of course not. But you were force-fed a narrative that it was. These same sort of conditions that made Trump's rise possible exist today for Elon, who's also a disruptor, as he remakes information distribution. He looks at all the places you can get news, and he says, if I offer something different, something real, and something more authentic and honest and transparent, I will win. Because it's the authenticity of truly free speech that is attracting audiences right now. The era of scripted puppets on TV and in politics is over. And I think the politicians and the media people who succeed in the future are going to be the ones who speak their own minds and not somebody else's. Trust in media and politics is low because we are scarred by years of feeling like we were lied to by people reading the scripts they were handed and sticking to prescribed narratives instead of the facts that we could see with our own eyes. COVID was the most illuminating period for this. Masks, 6 feet. If you're eating dinner and you stand up, that's okay, but if you're sitting down, or was it vice versa? I forget. Where did the virus come from? Questioning any of these things at the time was enough to get you exorcised from polite society. And we absolutely destroyed a generation of children when we closed the schools and we kept them closed long after we knew the truth. And yet, we've not held a single person accountable yet. But the line that runs through all this, a lot of opinions held by average Americans turned out to be true, even as they were being told to sit down and shut up by the people who write the narratives. The more that people feel lied to, the more they will turn to news sources, especially those who are unafraid to courageously speak freely and question official narratives. But despite all of our challenges, I'm optimistic about America because we live in a fundamentally good place full of good, hardworking people, innovators who get up in the morning with the next great idea, workers who dedicate blood and sweat to our industrial base, farmers who make the food and fiber that feed our country and the world, parents who want the best for their children, who get up early and stay up late, working on the new math. If anybody knows any good sophomore geometry tutors, I'll see you after the speech. I'm currently failing. We're all just everyday Americans. And our shared purpose is to leave the nation a little bit better than we found it so that our children and our grandchildren can do even better than we did. But to do this, we have to do what you're already doing, which is to fight for what matters. Now, I'm optimistic that free speech can and will be preserved, and I'm optimistic about the future of Western civilization. I think people are finally waking up to the barbarians who are at the gate all over this world. We must have absolute clarity in the fight between good and evil going on in this world today. On October the 7th, the world saw the barbarism at its worst when Hamas terrorists launched their savage assault on Israel. Let me be clear, there is no moral equivalence here. Israel was attacked. Israel has the right to defend itself. It's as simple as that. And it shocks me to this day that in the State of the Union address following that horrific day, Hamas propaganda made it into the president's speech. Shameful. But as Americans and as believers in freedom and dignity and civilization, we will stand unapologetically with Israel. And if you cannot tell the difference between civilization and savagery, between good and evil, well, we're truly lost. But I think America still knows the difference. And I believe the people in this room certainly know the difference. And as long as we all remember it, Western civilization will endure. Yep, I'm optimistic about America because no matter how dark the skies get, no matter how many times Tim Walz embarrasses you on national television, no matter how many times some junk pundit tells me I'm on the wrong side of history, the simple truth is that history is made by people who tell the truth and show up. And the American people, especially those who believe in faith, family, and freedom, are showing up. People like you, who fight for what is true, who fight for what is good, who are fighting for the future of Western civilization. Thank you, God bless you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you all very much.